Greetings and welcome to our Star Wars episode. I'm so excited to share this with you. It feels like almost a year in the making since we first announced this back in May of 2023, and now it's January 2024, and we're finally getting to the episode. So excited. A few notes about this episode. First, as always, check the episode description for any content notices and warnings. Also, I just wanted to give you all a heads up that I missed the first half of the episode because I was having car problems and was stranded in Blaine, Minnesota. So I had to wait for a tow truck and then an Uber and all this stuff. It was such a mess. So Emily and our two guests, Jenny and Josh from the Irreverent Bible Talk podcast, started without me. And then I was able to hop in about halfway through the episode when I finally got home. So that's why you will hear me just kind of randomly join in about halfway into the episode. That's what's going on there. Also, because I was not there for the first half of the episode, I was not able to fact check any of my horror Padawan Emily's facts that they shared about Star Wars. So if you are a hardcore fan and you hear something like that's not actually right, I encourage you to let Emily know by writing to horrornerds@church@gmail.com, and they will read that on air. They promise. Any fact checking that you do for any of the errors they make in the first half before I was able to join and fact check them live for that. So yeah, I cannot vouch for anything my horror Padawan said in that first half of the episode when talking about some of the facts. Like George, just as an example, George Lucas was not involved in the production of the film Solo, in spite of what Emily claims in that. And last but not least, I just want to say thank you all so much for your continued support, even during our hiatus due to the Writers Guild of America and SAG-AFTRA strikes. When we went on hiatus and focused on some books and stuff like that, it means the world to us, and we're so happy to get back into talking about movies, which we love, and sharing those with you. So without further ado, here is our episode on Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope.
Listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a ridiculously queer podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology. I'm Pastor Emily, and I am the elephant in a bantha suit.
I'm Jenny, and I'm the space oboist in Mos Eisley Cantina.
Yes.
And I'm Josh, and I am late getting to Tashi Station.
Oh, you gotta get those power converters.
No, I'm so doomed.
For real. Follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch. It's only $5 to sign up, and you get exclusive access to hours of bonus content, including BooTube episodes about TV shows, movie commentaries, bonus episodes, and so very much more, especially this season with all things Star Wars. Today, we are super excited to have with us the co-hosts of Irreverent Bible Talk, Jenny and Josh. Jenny is a Lutheran pastor currently serving as an interim in the greater LA area. She is the co-host of Irreverent Bible Talk, a podcast that's not your grandma's Bible study, unless your grandma happens to be really, really cool. When not doing pastory things, Jenny enjoys playing video games with friends, rolling dice for tabletop RPGs, and cuddling with her four-legged children. Josh has a degree in broadcasting and religion and is currently working at a recording studio in the Midwest. Very vague. He is a co-host of Irreverent Bible Talk with Jenny, where he can actually put his degrees to use. When not doing audio stuff, Josh can usually be found playing video games or watching anime. Welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be
Hello.
here.
Yes, very excited.
We are excited to have you. I don't know if you can hear the background. My roommate, I think, just aced her test. Anyway, so we start off with announcements, general check-in. What are you drinking today? All the
Yeah,
things.
so
How you doing?
this is how Josh and I always start our podcast is with what are you drinking? So I thought it would be fun to bring that over here to
Yeah.
Horror Nerds at Church. Today I am drinking a hoppy rice lager. It's like a local beer, but it's kind of inspired by like Japanese beers like Asahi, Kirin, that kind of thing. It's very light and enjoyable.
Sounds fancy, and I despise hops, so disgusting. What about you, Josh? What are you drinking?
Today I am drinking a rum and a cola from a red can, and anybody that listens on River Bible Talk knows I refuse to say the name until they sponsor us. So it's a rum and cola.
Josh is taking a hard stand there, waiting for the red can sponsorship.
I'm sure that they will be all over that sponsorship. I am drinking hot apple toddy, which is a special drink from Sabbath Sips, the TikTok series I do with one of my roommates, where we make fancy drinks.
Amazing.
Yeah, they do sponsor us because they are me. Maybe they don't. We don't have sponsors. I'm kidding. We don't have sponsors. We trade free ads with Nerds at Church, actually, because they are also me. Yeah. Nepotism for good.
I don't think it's nepotism if it's just you.
I mean, it's like me and Pace and me and Kay. So, like, I don't know. We're sibling podcasts.
I like it.
It
I think it all
works.
sounds
We're
good.
both doing spacey things right now, so I'm just like deep in my like sweet spot. But yeah, how have you all been? Have you been watching or reading anything exciting lately?
Oh my.
Yeah. My husband and I have been watching a show called Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead. Are you watching this, Josh?
I have not finished it, but yeah, I started watching it.
Why are we talking about it?
I don't know, because your husband only watches like romantic anime, so I never have
That's
a chance
true.
to talk about
we
this
do
crazy
we
stuff.
do watch a lot of like romantic comedy animes. This one is about the zombie apocalypse, except the zombie apocalypse frees this guy from his horrible exploitative office job, and so he's like so happy, and he makes a list of all the things he wants to do before he becomes a zombie, and it's just very bright and colorful and weird. Josh, have you gotten to the episode with the aquarium yet?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would remember.
It's been a while. I've watched a lot of anime.
I
A lot.
have not been that into anime, but we just started watching One Piece, which is the not the cartoon, but the live action from the cartoon. And that's super cute. Half of them are NB. It's delightful.
It's
They're
so good.
adorable. It's so
Like,
cute.
I was really nervous because, we've seen anime adaptions, but then like when we started watching it, I was like, this is really good. I've watched it 4 times all the way through because it's great for background noise. Like, I can have it on, pay attention, enjoy the characters, and it's nice to see that the actors are like super anime nerds. Some of them are, so it's really endearing.
We decided that Luffy is an autistic Sagittarius, so I was like, Luffy's my favorite. Luffy is me. This is just who we are. Okay.
That's fair.
Yeah. I also was watching Echo on Disney Plus, the new Marvel Cinematic Universe thing that
I have
they
not
did
watched that yet.
In collaboration with the Choctaw Nation, and it is fantastic. We just finished it, but
nice.
It is great. Yeah. And reading, of course, I have to plug Star Wars from a certain point of view. What am I on now? Return of the Jedi, we've been doing a book club. We started because we took a hiatus in the fall because of the strikes, because you basically have to use streaming services for all of our stuff. So we took a break for the strikes and did a bunch of books, and so we are just finishing up our book series. And Empire Strikes Back actually just came out from a certain point of view the other day. So if you are a bookie nerd in addition to Star Warsy nerds, it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do on this podcast, particularly when we have guests, is to invite them to share a church horror story. It doesn't have to be it can be supernatural, it can be the horrors of church and bad theology, it can be really however you would like to interpret that. So would either of you like to share a church horror story?
As a pastor and as a queer pastor, I feel like I have some horror stories, but I don't really
Mm-hmm.
feel like reliving them. So
That's fair.
I heard Josh has a good story though.
So the campus church that I went when I went to college,
Mm-hmm.
this happened before I had actually transferred there. And at one point there was like video stuff, but the camera was facing the pastor, and it was like I think a Wednesday night service, and all of a sudden like they just hear this yelling from the back of a church, but it was in Danish, and it's the church's like the Happy Danes tradition.
Yeah, I mean, at least
So
they're happy.
yeah, and like one of my campus pastors, she was like, "No, this is legit. This happened," and we bonded over that because ghosts. Let me see. Let me talk about it.
Are you a big ghosty person?
Yes, hardcore. Do believe, used to ghost hunt, all that. Like
Ooh.
I can't. Yeah, I mean, my boss tries to give me a bad time. Like, well, how can you say you're Christian but believe in ghosts? I'm like, well, I don't understand half of the stuff that's written in the Bible, so I'm gonna keep going with this and believe what I want to believe.
In the fall, we had Pace as a guest over on Irreverent Bible Talk, and we talked about spooky scaries in the Bible. And yeah, I feel like
Mm.
Josh and Pace kind of bonded over that. Like, ghosts are real. I was more of the skeptic.
Ghosts are real. I'll get into those stories someday.
We did a whole season on ghosts and Ghostbuster and stuff for our 4th season of Horror Nerds at Church. So that tracks. I think we had Pace and Joe, who was the co-host at the time on Nerds at Church, to wonder together if Jesus was a ghost, a zombie, a vampire. Like, what is the
Yeah, we for sure talked about that. Ghost, zombie, vampire, or lich.
Didn't you make a
yeah.
game about that, Jenny?
I'm such a nerd. I started making like a tabletop game that I was going to call Jesus Squad, and like I might actually bring this to fruition so nobody steal this idea from me, but it's Jesus Squad and it's a group of 4 and you are zombie Jesus, vampire Jesus, lich Jesus, and
Ooh,
ghost Jesus.
interesting. So, like, one of you can go through walls, and another can live off of blood, and
Gosh,
that sounds fantastic. And they've been doing more like churchy-ish RPGs, so I think I would play. I would definitely play.
It needs to happen.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
just need to sit down
Speak.
with all that free time that you have,
Yeah.
especially with Lent coming up.
What? I mean, yeah, okay. I was gonna say something very snarky about pastors, but being a pastor, that seems kind of not ideal. Yeah. Speaking of things that we just need to sit down and do, uh, we're here to talk about Star Wars. um, the thing on this podcast is we're terrible at transitions. I am very much too NB to transition. Um, and I have a shirt to prove it. But so That was my like grand attempt. Every once in a while, we do have a good transition, and then I ruin it by pointing out how good of a transition it was. So it's
I
great.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Pastor Emily, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs.
And I'm Pastor Kay, and my pronouns are she, her.
And we are Nerds at Church, a queer feminist podcast diving deep into faith, nerdery, and the Bible.
In our 4th season, we're diving deep into the season of Epiphany, including stars, astronomy, and all things magi.
Whether you're a Trekkie or a bookworm, a comics fan or a science nerd,
Or even a historical costumer or artist.
we've got connections for you.
And Emily still has thoughts on lembas bread.
If you've ever wondered what gifts Muppet Magi would bring or how they'd name constellations, we've got the perfect segment for you.
Nerds at Church releases Wednesday mornings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you catch your podcasts. If you love the weekly scripture readings, also known as the lectionary, our previous episodes are going up on YouTube too, so you can find us there for past and current episodes, and they all have captions.
As the ancient Christians said,
Pax Vobiscum.
So our film that we are talking about is, depending on how, I don't know, hip you are to the Star Wars cultness, the name of the film, the original name of the film was Star Wars, directed by George Lucas, came out in 1977. Since then, it has been kind of renamed as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. So, we watched all of the versions of it,
God.
basically. Pace and I watched the original theatrical release. Jenny watched the recreated original theatrical release. And Josh...
Yes, the fan project.
Yes. And Josh, I don't remember what you watched.
I watched the Disney Plus one, and I was sitting there like, oh, I forgot that they added that.
That was, yeah. So I watched the original theatrical release, and then last night I was like, okay, I have to do like demographic information. I'm just gonna like watch the regular one with the commentary that the DVD provides, and there were scenes that I was like, oh yeah, Jabba. Hey. Right.
The question, Josh, is in the version that's on Disney Plus, does Han shoot first?
No,
Ooh, I
he
can't.
doesn't.
I
That
mean,
was one of the
he
like
doesn't?
first things that they shoot at the same time.
But that like changed his whole persona. Like he
Mhm.
knew Greedo was gonna shoot, and he just got to it faster. Like so that's the whole point. Like Han knew it was coming because he's a smuggler. Like he knows these things.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I am, and this is probably not the only time I'll say this on this episode, but like, I am not a huge Star Wars nerd, but like, I know enough. I was like, whichever version I'm watching, it has to be one where Han shoots first. And then my husband was like, I have the despecialized edition, the fan made like recreation that he, nobody tell torrented like 10 years ago. So he was like, this is the one you're watching. And I was like, okay.
I am very much team Han shot first. There's actually a really great Sojourners article on why it's important that Han shot first in like our understanding of humanity,
Huh.
because otherwise we tend towards like the fact that Han has growth, right, is somewhat erased if he didn't shoot first. Like him shooting first is he clearly values himself and his life over anything else, and his go-to is violence. And then you see through the arc of particularly the first trilogy, the original trilogy, his growth, and even just the end of the movie, right, where he comes back.
Well, I was gonna say like he comes back but still chooses violence, right? Like his re-arrival at the end where it's like Han came back is to like shoot the shit, what are they called? The stormtrooper
TIE
fighters.
TIE
Mhm.
fighter. Is it
The
was
TIE
it a
TIE
fighters.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's right, like that's where there's growth. Does he become a perfect human? No. But we do see several episodes later, right, when it comes to his son, he doesn't choose violence.
Mm-hmm.
He chooses openness and open arms. Yeah, so I'm really excited. We watched Solo for our horror buff level of Patreon, so that's $10 or more a month, and did an episode on that. And so that was really interesting to like think about that. And in that, Han does shoot first. And I think that was the like George Lucas's way of like coming back around and being like, yeah, okay, he shot first here. But I do think it's important in this particular movie that he shoots first. So we may or may not get into that more. Who knows? We already like are skipping around, but so first
we went right off the rails.
yeah, that's what
Sorry,
we
not
usually
sorry.
do. Yeah, apology rejected. Um, we usually go off the rails, especially with guests, so it is fine. Also, Pace isn't here to like. Not that Pace would rein it in, but I'm a little bit being like, just wait, Pace, until you hear what we've talked about. Which actually then just makes me want to like talk about how wonderful Pace is and how much we all love them.
Aw.
Pace is
How
great.
much we all love
Agreed.
them. Yeah. Anyway, so some contextualization. 1977 was before I was born. You're welcome to all of you who now feel a little bit older.
Same.
Me too.
Nice.
Me 3.
Yeah. So it came out, Star Wars came out the same time as Saturday Night Fever, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Exorcist 2, The Heretic, The Rescuers. I love The Rescuers.
Right.
Pete's Dragon, and the Rankin Bass version of The Hobbit. It also came out in the like horror genres at the same time as Suspiria, which we covered for Horror Nerds at Church in season 4, and Orca, the killer whale, which I don't know much about it, but I know that I am Team Orca in the world today, so sounds exciting. We could sink some more yachts or whatever. Also, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is going to probably be on Patreon later this season for our Patreon subscribers, and House by Toho. I know nothing of that one because I am not a horror person. But yeah, that's some contextualization right there for you, folks.
Wow.
So, what were your first memories or experiences or earliest that you can remember of this film?
Oh man. So every year on Christmas we'd go to my grandma's after we do our family stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousins we'd always have the TV on, and one of them always would turn it to, I don't know if it was TNT, TBS. One of them would play Star Wars. And so like that is like some of my first memories of watching Star Wars was a small
Yeah.
child watching it on the TV. Grandma's big
like-
old school wooden TV.
Yeah. I feel like there are certain movies that are like marathoned during the holidays, right? It used to be one that I no longer watch because the author is a turf. But also like 007 sometimes and Star Wars. Yeah. They're like not actually Christmassy, but somehow associated with Christmas.
Like it.
Yeah.
I know we definitely had like the VHS tapes of
We
the
did
original
too!
trilogy like in our house growing up. And so I can't tell you at what age I first watched it, but it was definitely like kind of present in my childhood. Yeah, I mean we must have
Mhm.
watched it. We must have watched it more than once, just like in the VCR at home. Because it was kind of that like sort of background radiation, like because it had such
the
such an
cosmic background
influence.
radiation.
Yeah, basically. You know, it was like it had such cultural influence. And when I was watching it for this, I was kind of trying to see it with new eyes and like, what if I had never seen a Star War and I watched this movie, like
A
what would
Star
I
War.
what would I think about it? Not even one, not even a single Star War. So I was kind of trying to like see it with fresh eyes because I do feel like it's just kind of, I don't know, ingrained, especially the soundtrack. Like
Yeah.
I was trying to listen to the music and be like, what if you had never heard this before? What if you went to the theater and heard this score for the first time and like your brain
How epic
exploded
it is.
because it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also had the VHS, the original trilogy on VHS growing up. So I don't really know when we first like watched it. I remember talking to my dad about him watching the original series in theaters when
Mm.
we were like getting ready to watch the prequel trilogy in theaters when it was starting to come out. So I watched it sometime before then, but unclear where that all like plays out. But yeah, it's the so I was listening to the commentary last night, and I will first register that it was terribly done. The commentaries, they just had everybody come in individually and say stuff during the movie, and then they spliced it all together. So there was no conversation, and Carrie Fisher did not have nearly enough comments included. I have opinions. They never did. Did right by Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
Trues.
Yeah. But they were talking about it and talking about like how used to some of the stuff they got, like how used to the going into hyperspace, hyperdrive, and how used to that visual they got in the course of like filming and editing. And then when it was like first being like previewed and stuff, that like audiences were blown away by it and they were like, oh yeah, this is really incredible if it's your first time experiencing it. Which I was like,
Especially because they like invented so many of the visual effects. It was like stuff nobody had done before and they were
yeah.
like, yeah, we could make that happen probably, and then they like figured it out.
Yeah, that's the visual effects and sound effects people were two of the people on the thing, and they were talking about like at the time that Star Wars was made, um, the visual effects was not actually a sustainable industry. Like it wasn't an industry. So like the guy that did it was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it for this movie, and then he was like thinking that he was gonna have to then go from that to like some other thing and retire and no longer do visual effects because it wasn't a way to make a living. And now the idea of not having a visual effects person on a movie is bizarre, even for the most mundane of movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, this Star Wars was like so much of the shift in so much of how we do movies and films, which is kind of cool. Yeah. So more background. We've already dug into some of the background, but more background. Um, the development of the film was a bit of a like George Lucas being like, "Hey, please, please, please." And he was thinking of it as like the Saturday serials kind of thing, according to him. But it was originally called Adventures of the Star Killer, as taken from the Journal of the Wills Saga 1, The Star Wars, which was inspired by Flash Gordon and originally was going to be an adaptation, except they couldn't obtain the rights, and so got switched, and was heavily inspired by The Hidden Fortress by Akira Kurosawa. Um, Most notably, the droids fulfilling the two side characters' adventuring roles, which George Lucas claims that the droids were actually who he wanted to be the main characters, and wanted the film to follow along the droids, which I think actually happens a fair amount because R2D2 is just so amazing and C3PO tags along.
R2D2 is the hero of the movie, and at
It's
the
true.
end does not get a medal, and that's
I
an
know.
outrage.
That is a whole thing that I'm
So rude.
frustrated about, but we don't need to talk about that right now. We can save that until the end.
But we will get into it because
I have a
I made a
whole thing
comment
written
and
about
somebody
that.
made a comment on my comment, so I know we'll get there. Yes, and also heavily inspired by Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. And this was only like the second big movie that George Lucas directed. So this was not like George Lucas, how we know him today, but like, okay, I had one good hit. Can I get another? Kind of George Lucas. And there's a lot more that Pace would be able to decipher that's written down that I don't know what it means for any of it. But there are a bunch of people who were involved in making it the thing. And this was also the time when there was a shift between like movie style, that instead of doing a play adaptation, it was really a movie and written for movie stuff. And so shifting from a primarily dialogue based to also action based, like George Lucas watched like war plane fights, and that's part of like how he constructed and choreographed the fight scenes that we have. And Brian De Palma from Carrie initially called that opening scrawl that we all know and love gibberish. So like there's some things that were just so against the grain and so counterintuitive to what was the norm at the time that now we look back and we're like, bet you're eating those words, Brian De Palma.
Right. And like even today, like that opening scrawl, it can be so good, but if you don't do it right, it's just like, I don't want to start a movie by reading, says the guy that has to have captions on because he can't understand what's said half the time anymore.
And I was thinking about that opening crawl too, because it, like, again, trying to go into it imagining that I had never seen anything Star Wars, like George Lucas has this whole like universe and plot that he has to set up, and he has like there's so much plot packed into that opening scrawl, and they're like the evil empire and the Death Star and Princess Leia and the rebels, and it's like, here's all this context that you're gonna need, because otherwise there's no fucking way you're gonna understand this movie, which is a bold filmmaking choice.
Yeah. And that's part of what George Lucas. So I don't know how much of the commentary. So the commentary was done right before the prequel series, the prequel trilogy came out. So I don't know how much was George Lucas trying to like retcon what actually happened and his questionable choices, and how much was like actually how he was thinking about it. But he was thinking about it, like he claims that he was thinking about it as like a serial where like if you miss one week and none of your friends saw it, then too bad, you just don't know. So you really are dropped into the middle and just have to like scramble to catch up. And that is very much what happens. For those who have read from a certain point of view books, the end of each one has the Wills writing that opening scrawl, and it's one person writing it, or one Will writing it, and another coming in and being like, well, that's not true. Well, why are you saying that? Is it really that? Like, that makes no sense. What about this? You forgot to mention this or that or the other. And which is actually like a hilarious way to point out all of that stuff that you're talking about, Jenny, of like, you have to catch it all or you're going to be totally lost, and good luck. And you're going to be totally lost anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also George Lucas is going to change his mind a bunch of times about what stuff is.
Yes. Yep. That's the and that's like the retconning happened as soon as the 1980 release, right? They added episode 4, A New Hope, to the title. There was more background for Empire Strikes Back. The trilogy of trilogies started to like come together. But he didn't have all of that. He had like a vague background, because you have to have a background to set a scene well. But he did not have Clone Wars and all of that stuff before he made Star Wars. Yeah. Also in 97, there was a special edition that came out for the 30th anniversary, which is very exciting. And a novelization, which was ghostwritten by Alan Dean Foster. And a radio play version, which apparently is fantastic. And there's a Wikipedia article about it. Thanks, Pace. Also, fun facts that I learned in my different Star Wars nerdery. the actor who played C-3PO, Anthony Daniels, was originally not going to be the voice of the character C-3PO. And then people gave the director and folks shit about that. And so they ended up being like, okay, Anthony Daniels. But they tried to replace him like several times. And Anthony Daniels is actually the only actor who was in every single movie as C-3PO. So that I thought was really interesting. And also, he has a great biography called I Am C-3PO, The Inside Story, that I read a while ago and just really liked it.
Cool.
Yeah. Also, Lucas, in the like following the droids, Lucas called R2D2 the MacGuffin, which is like, I don't know, the one who moves the plot along, which is what he is. Like, he's got the plans. He's the one who like goes to find Obi-Wan, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
But
they're really chasing him the entire movie.
right? Because he is the hero of
Or
the whole thing.
or they, I don't know. Why does R2D2 have to have a male gender?
It's true. I think I was going to say this later, but I'll say it now. I think that R2D2 has chaotic, bisexual, NB energy.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
C-3PO has like whiny white cis gay energy, obviously, but I'm not the one that came up with that particular descriptor. Just for the record, for C-3PO, I agree with it. I just didn't come up with it. But yeah, R2D2 is the best, and we should all love R2D2 more and shower them with praise and stuff. Also, Anthony Daniels didn't even get his name on the like movie stuff for a long time. They just like didn't count. He didn't count as an actor because, I mean, back in the day, the stunt actors were not the ones voicing it. Were not the like carryovers, and that's
Right, I mean, like,
how they were trying to make him.
the person in the Darth Vader costume is not James Earl Jones.
Mm-hmm.
But they also
Yeah.
like learned all the lines too for the delivery because they weren't sure if they were going to get the spot or not. But
yeah,
like just hearing the cuts, like you couldn't use it because it was all muffled. But
yeah, and that's what happened. Like C-3PO, they had to go back in and record all of that for C-3PO and half the time for everybody who was interacting with, because to try and talk through the plastic was unreasonable.
But also, as an audio guy, like way better when they can't. You don't have to mouth movements. It's so much easier to be like, oh, he kind of bobs his head, so yeah, we'll just put this here.
I believe that. That's also, I think, why it's easier, not perfect, but easier to dub cartoons than live action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, and most importantly, the most important background information in this is that there are elephants in Star Wars. Elephants are my favorite animal, for those of you who have not already figured that out. There are elephants in Star Wars. The Banthas are elephants in Bantha costumes.
That's pretty rad. I did not know that. And if you had asked me, I would have said it's like a Muppet Jim Henson style construction. I would not have guessed there was an actual elephant in there.
Which would not have been like a totally off guess, but they didn't have the budget for all of the like robots and stuff that they needed. So like R2D2, half the time there was a person inside R2D2 maneuvering, and half the time R2D2 was the robot.
But were elephants more affordable? I mean, that seems like that would also be expensive.
I mean,
apparently
you would think in 77, like, animal rights was not a big thing at that point either. Like, no one cared as much.
George Lucas definitely, like, in the commentary when he said that, he was like, because that was just what we did in that day. Put an elephant in a giant costume, because it was easier to get people on and off and all of that.
I hate that phrase.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. But it was like two elephants is what they had, I think, for all of the Banthas. Which, like, they don't have a ton of Banthas. So I think, like, if you don't know if this is going to be a long-term thing where you're going to need Banthas next movie or not, maybe it's more affordable. I don't know. I'm just excited that there are elephants in space.
Fair.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So now that we've, covered half of the movie, what let's summarize it for our listeners. Um, we have taken to doing one sentence summaries. I will do Pace's one sentence summary for them because I think it's a fantastic one sentence summary. Pace's summary is space. What one sentence summaries do you two have?
I think, Emily, you and I were on a similar wavelength. My one sentence summary is Star Wars A New Hope, a film about a mediocre small town dude who for some reason gets way more attention than the vastly more competent but narratively secondary female protagonist.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Hmm.
I said droids and a princess save the day while the cis white boys get all the credit.
My summary was it's got a storyline that you would see in a lot of animes today. Going
That
off
tracks.
Virginia. Yeah. A lot of isekais, you would think.
Yeah, he used all of the tropes he could possibly find. Just tossed them all in there. Back and forth. Yeah. So a walk through the film. This is our space where like whatever came up for you, whatever you want to like make sure people talk about, or people know about, or any of that stuff. Yeah.
So one thing, and like I do want to be fair because I am like I feel like I'm coming at this from a I'm gonna shit on Star Wars kind of direction, but in fairness to Star Wars, I think that this film does a really good job of bringing you into the world along with Luke, right? That Luke starts out like very sheltered and he doesn't really know anything,
and he's
then
very whiny.
Oh yes, he's so whiny. But he is like discovering all this stuff that he's like hearing about the Force and he's hearing about the war and he's hearing about what happened to his father allegedly. And so like as his horizons are kind of opened, you as the audience are also getting to experience that, which I think is really well done. The part that annoys me is, and this is very much like looking at it in retrospect, is that Rey in the sequel trilogy gets so much shit of like, how does she know how to do this? How does she know how to do that? And I got to the end of A New Hope and I was like, where the fuck did useless Luke Skywalker, who was fixing moisture evaporators, learn how to be a fighter pilot? And my husband was like, oh, hang on, Josh, because I think I'm going to preempt you. Josh was ready to do a well, actually. I saw it.
There's right, like even all of us have glasses, so it's real easy to push the glasses up on the nose for the well, actually, too.
Yeah. So see if I can cut your argument off, Josh, before you even make it. Because Luke says, "Oh, like I used to go around on my speeder and I would like shoot the whatever, the little rats."
Womp rats.
Right, which is kind of like saying, I drive a fast sports car, therefore I can pilot an F-16. Like, they're not equivalent. Like, I acknowledge that Luke had skills, I just don't think he had fighter pilot skills.
Especially in, like, what, 10 hours?
I think, like, the entire movie takes place in the space of a couple of days.
If that, yeah.
If that.
Yeah. I agree.
All I'm saying, Josh, is that I think Luke Skywalker is a real Mary Sue. It's just, he's not believable. They give him all these abilities and there's like no justification for it.
Apparently now they call boys who are Mary Sues Gary Stews.
We could just call them Luke Skywalkers.
No.
Yes!
I'm sorry. I do feel like I should say I love Josh to death and we give each other shit a lot. So like, sorry, Josh.
No, you're good.
Apology rejected on everyone's behalf in this podcast. Unnecessary apology. All the shit, please give.
It's fair. I was just gonna say, looking at the prequels too, like Anakin was the same way because he had that, like, hey, you can race pods. It's like your example, like, oh, I can race a Ferrari. That doesn't mean I can fly a 747.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he
Yeah,
goes out and saves the day.
they definitely make Anakin, especially like young Anakin, like way too much of a genius, that he's like, look, I built these droids.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been like my first robot, and it was just the like walking trash can that used to be at Disneyland. Like,
That's basically C-3PO. And that's why his one leg's different color. Glasses push.
I mean, there is a walking trash can in the Jawa's mover.
Oh, yeah, like, because I was trying to read about that because I couldn't remember if like R2 sabotaged that other R2
Okay.
unit.
So, here's the deal. In Star Wars from a certain point of view, A New Hope, the original one, the Star Wars from a certain point of view, for those of you who have not been listening to me talk about how wonderful they are for a while, takes the main story arc from the perspective of everyone who is not Luke, in this case Obi-Wan, Han, Leia, basically, which is fascinating. And one of them is the perspective of the R4 unit, the red droid. And in that, so the from a certain point of view are like, maybe it's canon, maybe it's not, you decide for yourself officially. But they, in that, R2 knows that there's a mission and that they have to go on it, and so is trying to get the R4 unit, like, initially is maybe trying to sabotage the R4 unit, but the R4 unit like wakes up and is like, what are you doing? Get away from me. And then R2's like, look, I have this mission, and like is telling them all about it. And they're like, sounds fake. But they sit with it. And then when Luke and Owen, his uncle, are like coming to buy the droids, the R4 unit self sabotages so that
to save the day.
R2 can get bought and go on his adventure to save the day.
That droid was the real hero of the movie.
That's what I was gonna say. Damn it, Jenny.
The other thing that we've learned from our podcast is that Josh and I kind of share a brain, so
it's pretty weird, but
that
neat.
Tracks. Yeah, that tracks. Yeah, I love R2D2. R2D2 is one of the ones that, like, Pace and I are picking like a couple characters to like trace throughout the season, and then at the end we're gonna like specifically talk about them. And some of them are like up for suggestions from our listeners, but R2 is one of the ones that I was like, I am following R2 because I love R2.
valid.
And it really is like R2D2, protagonist extraordinaire and sentient. I think R2 has the Force.
Ooh, I like that take.
We have merch that is not quite up yet, but is coming, because I think all droids go to heaven.
You
I
can
think
see
droids
3PO?
have. I mean,
Hey,
yeah.
I mean, listen.
He's not like an evil droid.
I
He's
know.
just whiny and incompetent and terrified of everything.
Wasn't there
I
an
do
evil
feel like
droid in Empire?
C-3PO gets some like redemption. Like in this first film, he's pretty annoying, but like, I don't know, the episodes 7, 8, and 9 absolutely have their flaws, but I actually really liked C-3PO's arc in the sequel movies. Because I feel like he finally kind of like finds his courage a little bit.
Yeah. Also, they've been wiping his memory like nobody's business.
Yeah, poor dude.
He can't keep his
poor
mouth
little
shut.
droid.
Right? Like, he doesn't recognize
dude,
Princess Leia.
Right. Also, like, I don't think he would be able to, C-3PO would be able to comprehend the fact that Darth Vader was the one who created him. Like, I think that would like blow his circuits.
Yeah, I think that would probably cause its own meltdown.
Yeah, so this was something that I couldn't remember because in this film, in episode 4, it seems like the way that it was written, C3PO and R2D2 don't like know each other, that they like both happen to be aboard this ship. But like some of the things that C3PO says early on, it seemed like it was really kind of implying that he didn't know R2D2. And of course you can explain that by saying like he got his memory wiped and all that stuff, but it kind of seemed to me that that was maybe a retcon, that originally these two droids were completely unrelated before the film started, and then they like are thrown together by circumstance, which I don't know, I kind
Which
of
is
like
like
that
how you do a
better.
lot of like dual protagonist
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I think my interpretation of it was, as a protocol droid, his primary allegiance is to whoever presently owns him, whether it's
Right.
through unsavory means or not. And so he has some affinity for R2. And even says like, we've worked together in the past and it's been great, whatever. But is not, partly I think because he's gotten his memory wiped a bunch, and partly because he is so rigid about protocol that he's not going to like really push, and he's not really going to be as open to relationship and depth of relationship with droids or anyone, because it's against protocol. The protocol is you serve, right? These are your masters. And this is definitely colored by the books that we've been reading, because when it comes to like Return of the Jedi and Jabba and Luke selling them to Jabba, and like C3PO does this where he's like, well, I guess I'm Jabba's now. That sucks. Thanks a lot, Luke. But ultimately it's like, okay, until Luke comes and rescues
I was
him.
gonna say, even then, like they still don't tell C3PO the plans because they don't
Yeah.
trust him.
Yeah, he can't keep a secret for shit. Like,
Mm-mm.
nope. One of the other things that I want to point out that Pace pointed out. So when we first encounter Obi-Wan in this, I was like, we were watching it together, and I was like, it seems like Obi-Wan doesn't recognize R2D2, but he should recognize R2D2, right? And Pace pointed out that there's a fan edit that we'll link to in the show notes of Obi-Wan with PTSD. That like part of that disconnect is that he has PTSD. So they just do flashbacks, right? Like that's how they portray it in the YouTube video. But that I thought was really interesting way of thinking about when, because Obi-Wan as old Ben has been like kind of hanging out with Luke and like seeing him occasionally but not a lot, and so Luke like knows who he is, but not in a way that has been very vividly necessarily bringing up his past and the like wars that he fought.
Although
And so,
like the more recent canon, I can't remember, it's in one of the shows that my husband made me watch so many Star Wars shows. I love my
Aw.
husband. I love him a lot more than I love Star Wars. But anyway, the idea, right, is that like Obi-Wan takes the twins and like stashes them, right? So like takes Leia and is like, okay, this is going to be your new family, and then he like kind of stays on Tatooine and like keeps an eye on Luke. So you would think that like Luke's very existence would trigger everything that Obi-Wan has gone through.
Mm.
I mean I think so, kind of, right? Like there's an extent to which, yes, and also he has seen Luke at ages and stages that like he never saw Anakin as a baby, right? Like Anakin was already 5 or 6 when he started Jedi training, which is very late, which is like a whole other thing that Pace and I actually will have talked about. We have talked about, but it will come out in March. In our Patreon episode on Ahsoka's arc. But like the Jedi take babies from their families to become Jedi. And so while he's been around babies, because the younglings and the Padawans are like grow up in the Jedi Order, that's not who Anakin was. And so he first is getting to know Luke as this baby, and like babies just have power to like shift things and shift how we think about things and shift our hormones, whether or not we are the ones who give birth to them. And so I think that helped kind of jolt him out of it. And then the things that Luke is doing are not Jedi things, right? He's
Right.
fixing moisture evaporator machines and stuff.
And going into town for power converters.
No, he never gets to go.
Oh, God.
His Uncle Owen never lets him out.
Luke. Poor Luke.
I like to think that maybe from my thought process, like Obi-Wan probably recognized R2, but didn't want to give too much away. And that could be that, R2 was supposed to have their memory wiped, which I don't believe that they did. I believe that they're fully conscious of everything throughout all the whole series. And maybe that's why they're not telling C-3PO, so it doesn't blow C-3PO's mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Hello, Pace.
Hello.
Welcome. We're very far along. We're in the walkthrough of the film.
We've taken many tangents.
I did mention we're like talking about the Obi-Wan has PTSD and why didn't he recognize R2D2 right now?
Yeah, I kind of buy the idea that Obi-Wan is like just has a good poker face, because especially the way he's portrayed in episode 4, he kind of has that like wise wizard thing going on, right? Like Gandalf, keep your secrets, like that same kind of energy. So I feel like it's, at least within the confines of this film, he is kind of doling out information to Luke like very gradually, and keeping a lot to himself that he does know, and so I could definitely see it that way.
Yeah. That tracks for me. And to your point, Josh, R2D2 has never had his memory wiped. That is clear. Like they talk about that in Clone Wars at one point, that Anakin doesn't ever wipe R2D2's memory. And in Star Wars, from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi, there's a droid in Jabba's palace that encounters R2D2, and R2D2 like helps it figure out how to not have its memory wiped, and that like hints at this idea that memory wiping is how droids are kept from becoming sentient. And since R2D2 never had had their memory wiped, they are sentient.
I like
and
that.
they like can help other droids resist.
I like that.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. I'm basically just here to advertise for the book. Yeah. Also, I think that Jenny, what you were saying about like just like being subtle and low key and not giving away that they knew what was going on. The number one rule, which we will find at some point when we get to Leia, is never admit your cover's blown. Right? And so like she is like, I'm on a diplomatic mission. How could you? And they're like, these are all of the reasons why we know you're not on a diplomatic mission. And she's like, this is a diplomatic vehicle. You have to treat me with respect. And I love it because it's just like that point of like, don't ever admit that your cover has been blown, because when you do,
even if your enemy knows something, you don't know how much your enemy knows, and so like don't give them anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leia's brilliant. I love Leia so much. Also, this has never been clear to me, and again, there are like much greater Star Wars nerds on this call than myself. What is Leia the princess of?
Alderaan. Like the planet. Her adopted father was
Alderaan. You know, the planet that was exploded in front of her face while her parents were still there.
Yes, and she never is tempted by the dark side.
Also, and she comforts Luke
because this old man,
this old guy that he kind of knew died.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I like thought Alderaan was like a democracy or a republic or something, but apparently I'm wrong.
It's kind of, yes. Like
It's a constitutional
It's one of those
monarchy.
weird things. Yeah, because like we also got introduced to this in the prequel trilogy where Queen Amidala is an elected queen and she serves for 4 years as an elected queen, and then she's
Mm-hmm.
not a queen anymore, and she has a sub. So it seemed, but Alderaan for some reason seems to like Leia's mom is queen, and she seems to stay queen for the entire duration of Leia's life. So it's not entirely clear
Mm.
how their government works, but it's still supposedly a democracy. Like, it makes no sense.
And
Mm-hmm.
her whole planet gets exploded, which like obviously is horrible, especially for the
Hmm.
people who live there. But then at the end, like she's kind of still like princessing because they do the whole like I know we're gonna talk about the award ceremony at the end, but she's like presiding over this whole thing, and
Mhm.
it's like your whole planet got blown up. Like, what are you the princess of?
I think maybe this is okay. What if this is the beginning of her shift from royalty to armed service? Kind of like
She's
how
This
Prince
is where
Harry
she
did the
becomes
reverse
General
and went
Leia.
from like,
Yeah.
yeah,
like maybe not general yet, but like
and she's also still a
like around there.
senator. So I mean, the Senate is disbanded at the very beginning of this movie
Mhm.
off screen. Like they don't like it
Yeah.
doesn't actually happen that we see, but she is still like she would still have some diplomatic stuff as a senator. So I feel like that, along with Mon Mothma being a former senator who we get introduced to in the third movie, would put them like higher up in the whatever of the rebels,
Mm-hmm.
the hierarchy of the rebels. It's clear that the rebels also don't have their shit together and
What?
are
No
not great.
way.
What are you talking about?
I
They were
I don't
fully
know what.
mapped out and
Yeah.
strategic.
Uh-huh.
I always saw it as like how it's still President Obama, President Bush. Like it's still like
Mm.
you still carry that title with you, even though you're no
I
longer
mean,
serving.
does he?
You
I'm
are
thinking of the most recent.
queen
Not
of a pile of rocks in space that are dust.
space
I mean,
Rocks
debris.
rocks that
technically,
are no longer in a pile.
it's still
Yes.
there, just in
Yes.
pieces.
Floating
A weird
debris.
jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I would just like to say it was delightful to hear some of the phrases that are like so iconic and some of the sayings that are so iconic during this movie. So, like, these are not the droids you're looking for, right? Which I have a game that is my favorite game ever called Starflux. It's a variation on the game Flux, where the rules change all the time and half the time you win on accident.
Mm-hmm.
And Starflux is the space nerd version. So it has like not the droids, but everything is just off. So it's like laser sword instead of lightsaber. But it's
Legally
everything's just
distinct laser sword.
Mhm.
yeah. So that they don't have to deal with any of the copyright stuff. But it takes like Firefly, Star Trek, Star Wars, and like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and just like combines them all.
You're gonna
It's
make me
fantastic.
cover Firefly, aren't you?
You
I
should.
hate that show.
What?
I hate that show.
Excuse
I
me for
had
the
no
ear-piercing scream
idea,
that I did.
Pace. I thought that was Jenny. Not gonna lie. I was like,
Joss
wow, that was like
Whedon.
a very good scream, and you're like just straight face looking down. No, it's Josh.
No, I my feelings on Firefly are mixed, but for the record, fuck Joss Whedon.
Right?
Yes.
Same.
Yeah,
Yes, for the
but
record. 100%. Yeah.
gave us some great stuff. Still an asshole, scumbag.
Okay. But imagine, like, part of it for me is imagine how much better it could have been if he had not been the one.
Yeah, but we could do that for Star Wars or like literally anything, but we're
I
still
know.
stuck with the shit.
I know.
Anyway.
But, like, it's like the Bible. Sometimes you just gotta look and be like, how the hell did all of those gems even make it all the way into the final copy when it went through that much patriarchy and
Yeah,
that
that's
much
true.
empire to get there? Like, how did we get the daughters of Zelophehad? How did they make it all the way? Yeah, that's my yeah. Also, let the Wookiee win is always solid advice.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Solid.
Did y'all, since I came in late, I don't know, did y'all talk about Darth Vader's helmet yet, looking like a
No,
Gland's
I
penis?
saved that one just for you.
Oh, thank you. Darth Vader's helmet looks like a Gland's penis, which is fitting since Anakin is a dick. So just wanted to put that out there.
I feel like there is nothing that we could say about that the movie Spaceballs did not say better.
Fair. And honestly,
Because I feel like
I
that was
was-
most of Spaceballs, was they were just like, let's talk about all the penis imagery in Star Wars.
Speaking of which, maybe we should cover that. Should be one of the movies we cover that we haven't fully scheduled out for Patreon, Emily.
Spaceballs?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
The
thinking, I was trying to figure out how to fit into the season, but it won't fit on the main feed. But we can do it on Patreon. You
I'm
heard it
down
here
for that.
first, folks.
Yeah. I can't wait. Okay, and now the final awarding of the ceremonial medals of cis white boyness.
Yay!
You showed up.
they're the only
Have a
ones that get it.
cookie.
Right?
Okay, Chewie got robbed.
Mm-hmm.
R2D2 Super got robbed.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's all I have to say about that.
Right.
R2D2
And if Han and Luke were gonna get a medal, like, yes, affirming the who got robbed, but also Leia got robbed herself.
Yeah.
She's giving them out. She doesn't even get one. She has to give them away. And if they get one, then C-3PO even deserves one. Like, they're on the same
Does
level
he?
as C-3PO. Yes, he did one thing, right? He was complaining and whiny and whiny cis gay, but
Yeah, but
he
got
did
his.
send them away, right? Like the like 2 times he did a right thing when they were in the Death Star, and he was like,
He also,
he
C3PO
went
also
away.
kept them from getting squished in the trash compactor. I feel like that
Barely.
halfway. R2
that
Barely.
deserves an
work.
honorable mention.
Right.
C-3PO was just
He-
screaming at him.
That's the point, though, is he did so little, and yet he deserves it just as much as Han or Luke.
It's fair.
They each
I
did
mean,
like one thing.
Which is to say that really none of them deserves a medal.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Well-
how many? Here's the other thing too. Like the whole fucking Death Star was destroyed. Did
Mhm.
y'all talk about this yet? How many
No.
like people they just
Lives
like
were-
full on obliterated?
Right, that
The-
Obi-Wan is like,
Like,
when
how many
Alderaan
hundred-
is destroyed, and then like nobody even bats an eye when the entire planet.
Like
And
how
it's like
many
a
poor
planet
like janitors and
inside.
stuff who are not even like on board with the Empire just got stationed to this thing or drafted or
I mean, like,
destroyed.
like, first of all, I do not think that we should condone blowing up a planet or a space station, but at least I will say that you could like plausibly argue that everyone on the Death Star was like a combatant, which like you clearly could not for Alderaan.
Yes.
So like both are bad.
You know, there
ultimately.
was some poor barista that was just trying to get through their shift,
Right.
and all of a sudden,
On-
just like, what
on
the hell?
the Death Star.
Yeah, I mean,
If your
there's-
place of employment is called the Death Star, you need to rethink your choices.
I mean, you gotta eat, you gotta pay taxes. I'm sure the Emperor had crazy tax rates.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really weird that Chewie was up there with him, turned around
gets
and just
nothing.
roared. Like, what the hell?
It's like, "Arr."
like, dude, this is a official ceremony. Like, can you not scream?
Have you all heard
Rude.
the
Did you know that Chewie's voice is made up of a bunch of different bears?
Ooh,
Aw.
And lions and a
Actual
few
bear
other
noises
animals.
and stuff. Yeah.
I love that. Have you
Also,
all
baby
heard-
lions roaring is adorable. I saw a TikTok.
Have you all heard the fan theory about Chewie and Han?
What, that they're
Okay.
gay for each other?
Well,
Or
that's not what
Or
I was
that
referring to. but
Chewie
yes,
is or that Han is Chewie's pet?
the latter.
Yes.
That
So-
space is, yeah.
This is maybe you've already talked about this in another episode, but Wookiees live way longer than humans, and Han says at some point that like he saved Chewie's life, and so Chewie is like indebted to him, and they're like lifetime loyalty. And people are like, why would this Wookiee like be so devoted to this dumb human? And it's like, well, you wouldn't do that just for some random life form. But if like a really heroic dog saved your life, you would stick with that dog for the rest of
Mhm.
its life,
That's
right?
fair.
Yeah.
And that Han is Chewie's dog. And I really like that interpretation.
Pace has mentioned that, but when you're saying it, Jenny, I'm like, oh, okay. Pace just said it as fact, and I was like, okay. And then Jenny's like, but these are all of the. Okay, yeah.
You got to lay the groundwork.
And also, I love in the sequel trilogy how when Leia and Han get divorced, that Chewie keeps Han, like he keeps custody over Han.
he gets the dog in the divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about that in our. Well, we will talk about that / have in our solo episode for Patreon buff horror buff Patreon people.
Yeah.
I keep talking about that episode, Pace, just so you know. But that is I think it works both for like they might be in a relationship and Han just might be a pet.
Yeah,
that works.
But I just really like that spin that it puts on everything, that like everything from Chewie's point of view is just like he's taking his dog to the dog park, and he's like, they're so cute. Like, look at all these humans.
They're
My dog got
roughhousing.
all their
my
little
dog got first
problems.
place.
My
in
dog got
this.
blue ribbon.
He got a little medal.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this I think is the perfect transition into our deep theological discussions because I think it is a fantastic pushback against the speciesism that is so rampant in all of the Star Wars universe. And some of it is like the characters themselves, right? Where Leia calls Chewie a walking carpet, which is a little bit, I think, like Han shot first. Like, I don't want to think that Leia would say that about Chewie. And also, she has some growth to do too, I guess.
Yeah.
But to like push back, because so much of the way that we experience Star Wars is so human centric and like human vocal cord centric, so that all of the other stuff, like, we kind of get like Jabba the Hutt and Hutties as a language, but like Chewie's language is never spoken by anyone except Wookiees. Like even C-3PO, who is supposed to translate all of this stuff, can translate from Wookiee to Basic Galactic or whatever, but doesn't ever translate Basic Galactic into Wookiee, which is not what it's actually called. It's like Sulwick?
Shriwook.
I looked it up once. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like once you get into the deep dive, like fundamentally, I think you just have to come to the conclusion that Star Wars is deeply flawed and that fans are going to come up with like better canon than actual canon in almost every instance. So like yeah, Wookiees are the superior species compared to humans. Like they are more advanced.
Yeah.
If you just accept that premise, it makes everything better. My sister right now is like really, really into stuff about the clones, but like exclusively fan fiction. Like not canon clone shit, but like people who are deeply exploring the experience and inner world of the clones.
Love it.
I like it. And they have like the Bad Batch, I think, is the closest any canon comes to that of like, look, it's clones. There was an episode in Clone Wars too, but
Don't forget about I am the Star Wars, like, I don't know if Emily talked about this or not, but I am on the spectrum and I am also ADHD. And what that means is that sometimes my serotonin will come from these really deep, obscure dives into something that absolutely
Mhm.
makes no sense. And so last year, I decided I'm going to read every single canon novel of Star Wars. And I read about like maybe 40 of them before the serotonin stopped juicing the way it's supposed to. And but still, like 40 is a fair amount.
It's a
And
That's a
pretty good
lot.
number.
so, like, we cannot forget, while the film and on-screen universe of Star Wars is problematic at best, the books are so good and do a lot of this stuff too. And so there's so many great novels out there that talk about the clones, experience of the clones, stuff like that. And I think I mentioned this in one of the recent episodes that'll be up on Patreon. We were talking about the clones, but Karen Travis's novelization of the Clone Wars movie, fantastic, and does a really good job of humanizing the clones and putting their needs and the way they're treated by the Galactic Republic to the forefront and stuff like that.
Mm.
This feels like a great moment to mention one of my favorite like Tumblr memes, which is somebody posted like uh Disney can't destroy the EU, like the EU is whatever like lives on in your heart or whatever, and then somebody else misunderstood and instead of extended universe thought they were talking about the European Union.
That's what was in my head when you said that. I was like, of course they can't destroy the European Union.
Yeah,
They're doing that themselves.
it's good. It's
Even
good.
Britain couldn't.
I
They
mean, to be
tried.
fair, in my head it was like, they can't destroy the European Union. The European Union will nevertheless continue to protect us from things like Apple's ridiculous, like, user only, whatever, special snowflake chargers and
Oh my
privacy.
I mean, we can hope. But this was specifically a post about Star Wars.
That's fair.
The extended universe.
I went with European Union though
Yeah.
too.
I
That's a
have
lot.
I've read about maybe 15 books from the former extended universe. But I can I honestly though, like I this is a tangent and a half. I'm sorry, listeners. No, I'm not. I'm not
I
sorry.
was
This
like,
is why you listen
Pace,
to this.
come on now.
Anyway, but like people complain a lot of Star Wars fans complain a lot about Disney getting rid of the extended universe, and for good reason. I mean, there's some good stuff in there, but like it's also still very much centered on white cis men. And one of the things I love about the new canon is it is there are few and far between books on white cis men. Most of the books are on other people and
Mhm.
expanding that. And I love that. And I love that Disney is devoting their literature to that, even if they refuse to depict other than white cis men on screen, at least in literature. They are.
I mean, I like for what it's worth, I do think that the newer Star Wars content has been a little better in terms of like diversity. I'm not saying it's good, but like they've
It's
taken some
better, for
baby
sure.
steps. And then
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course like the actors of color that they have cast have had to deal with like horrible backlash
Oh, God,
because
right?
like how dare there be an Asian person in my space opera, but that's
Yeah. Especially an
separate
Asian
issue.
woman. Like, yeah.
Well,
Which
and
like also pairs with like casting Andor as like someone with a natural and not exaggerated Latino accent was a first. Like I remember I'm not going to say their name because they don't know if they don't want me to repeat who they are, but like talking about like going with their dad, and that was the first time their dad had ever seen a movie with somebody with a similar accent where it wasn't exaggerated and it wasn't the like goofy character or like some sort of racist portrayal.
Yeah.
And like they kind of get at that, right? Like C3PO has a British accent. And so you kind of get that there are different accents, but they're still all largely European
Until we
in the
get to
original
the
trilogy.
prequel trilogy And then we have all the racist accents.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Oh my gosh.
I did not know that when I first saw the episode 1,
Okay.
which we'll get to, you know,
Did
in
we
5 movies or something.
did you talk about any of my background stuff that I had in there?
Some of it, but then a lot of it was just like the names of people,
Yeah,
and I
I
was
figured.
like,
So
gibberish.
I just want to kind of bring this up because that's exactly what's coming to mind. Is that the prequel trilogy is widely considered to be awful because George Lucas had like sole creative and directorial control over it. The original trilogy, one of the reasons it is so enduring is because George Lucas came up with this idea and it was a solid idea, but we needed all these other people to really turn it into the gold that it has become. So Gloria Katz and Willard Hayek's revisions to the script that George Lucas to make it coherent. Brian De Palma, who directed Carrie, which we're going to cover on the show at some time, rewrote the entire opening scrawl for George Lucas because he read the opening scrawl and was like, this makes no sense. No audience member is going to stick around through this. So he wrote it on behalf of George Lucas.
We were talking about it, that you have to like have such like it's a bold thing to do, but you have to do it so well. And turns out George Lucas could not do it so well and needed help.
And he fully ripped, well, not a rip off. I mean, it's an homage to Flash Gordon. But that's how Flash Gordon would start too, was with those kind of. But then we have the cinematographer, Gilbert Taylor, who was always battling with George Lucas over the production. But because of his cinematography, we have a lot of those great shots. Marcia Lucas edited the movie to make it what it is. And she divorced George Lucas after Return of the Jedi. And we really, really miss her editing for that prequel trilogy.
Oh, wow.
And then Ralph McQuarrie's art is like the entire, close your eyes and just visualize anything in the Star Wars universe. And comes from Ralph McQuarrie's artistic concepts. Then, of course, ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, doing the special effects. So it's like this huge team effort put together this great trilogy. And then when we see what happens when George Lucas gets all the credit for it, and suddenly there's nobody to help him edit, nobody to help him. And we just get his single-minded vision, and that's the prequel trilogy. So,
yep.
Interesting. I did not know all of that. This changes everything. I mean, kind of. Speaking of sexism and holding up a man who's not actually competent, sexism in space.
That was my line.
I know. But I had a transition and I had to grab it while I had it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because women don't wear bras, apparently, in
underwear.
Space.
No underwear in space.
I mean,
even though what we actually know is that like diapers is mostly what people wear in space. Or yeah.
I feel like the problem with Leia's characterization is not whether or not she wears a bra. The problem is that she is wildly more competent than any male character in the movie, and yet she is given such like short shrift.
To the extent that like the movie, I think it was episode 8 was the first one to be released after she died. And they had like Forever Our Princess or whatever for Leia, for like Carrie Fisher, instead of Our General. And like that it's always like pushing her back into the like delicate damsel, even though she's the one who like pushes back against Darth Vader, pushes back against Tarkin, pushes back against all of these guys, watches her entire home planet, including her parents, that she is also politically responsible for, be destroyed, and then comforts Luke about the old guy in the neighborhood who disappeared.
Yeah.
She also shut out that vent.
Yeah. Exactly. And then sends them all to their potential doom with the trash compactor.
I mean, they would. I mean, it's not like they were in danger. Stormtroopers can't hit a shot anyway. But
Right.
no, I
But
mean, obviously they to get out of
but
the hallway. It was like,
The Sandcrawler, only Imperial troops could have that accuracy to take out the treads.
which
The
as long
only
as we,
time they've ever been accurate.
it just cracks me up that they say that line. Like I wrote that down, and it's just like that's the only time you're going to hear it is in this first step. Like, no, they're terrible shots.
Yeah, famously.
And
Yeah,
then-
and like just the fact that obviously, and we can talk about the retcon that Luke and Leia were not originally siblings, and that's so obvious in this movie
Mm-hmm.
because she is so clearly set up as the romantic interest, which, like, of course, like, this is how movies are made, especially in the 70s. And this, like, oh, well, there's three characters, right? It's like Luke, Leia, and Han. Like, who's Leia gonna fall in love with? Which still kind of ends up being like the end result, that she does end up with Han. But like, one of the very funny moments is when, after they've escaped the Death Star, Han is like, do you think a girl like that and someone like, and Luke's
Luke's
like,
like,
no.
No,
Never.
do
No.
not.
Narratively, this is clearly being set up that she's going to be with me because she gave me a kiss on the cheek. And it's like, this is all very cringy.
Yeah.
If your female characters are more than love interests, then you don't run into these kinds of problems, George Lucas.
It reminds me of the Hunger Games and the way Katniss was manipulated into a love triangle with Peeta and Gale. That, like, even as she was in the love triangle, that was not the main thing for her. It was never the main thing for her. It was the main thing for both of the boys, but it was never the main thing for her. She was, like, facing death and starvation and fights to the death and all of that stuff. But she was never like, how can I figure out a romance in the midst of dystopic catastrophe?
Yeah, and I feel like the books were way more nuanced about that than the movies.
Oh, yeah.
Not to be that person, but
definitely.
push my glasses up.
Another thing you're going to make me cover on this podcast, I'm sure, Emily. I made Emily cover Twilight, so I guess it's only fair.
To be fair, I think it was my idea to cover Twilight. But
it was my idea, to be fair, because I talked about that in season 1 of the podcast. Before you were even an inkling of a co-host.
All right.
Back in the days when...
I thought it was just our, like, lowest common denominator of how we could start.
It was back in the days before you won the pet costume contest, so you couldn't even be a co-host until you won that. No, I'm kidding. It's a running joke on this podcast that Emily's prize for winning our first ever pet costume contest was to become the co-host.
I like it.
That is no longer a prize available to people.
Speaking of pet costume contest, Josh and his wife did a costume of their dog as KK Slider from Animal Crossing, and it was the cutest fucking thing.
And you didn't submit it?
Why did you not enter the contest?
Because I don't think Josh knew the contest existed. Possibly
I didn't at that point.
This moment.
Okay.
Right.
Next Halloween. Next October.
Yes.
We've done it for 3 years now?
Yes.
It took a long time to get the eyeliner off.
Oh, I love it. The one thing I do want to quick say is if you go back and listen to our interview with Claudia Gray, she does make a very good point about Leia's character, because she says that Leia hands down is her favorite character in the Star Wars franchise and stuff. But she was talking about growing up in the 70s and just how much of a desert cinema was for strong female characters. And it wasn't until Star Wars came along that she finally she said it was like an oasis in the desert. And she said, of course, it's so much different now and we've come so much farther along, but still just that her to just come on screen and just, whisk everyone away with her competence compared to everybody else was just...
It's kind of like a New York Christmas wedding. It was one of the very first LGBTQ holiday movies. And now I tried to watch it this year and I could not because it's terrible. It's like a bad, maybe B movie. But at the time, it was one of two that were out that year. And it was the first year that there were any out in any sort of meaningful way. And so it was like this huge deal. And now I look back and I'm like, I'm glad we have grown since then.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean even like as a girl growing up in the 90s, like seeing Princess Leia was like a role model, right? Um we had more kick-ass female characters in the 90s than they had in the 70s, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like she kicks ass. And I love her, like the way Carrie Fisher played her in the later movies in like 7 is so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like what a glow up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So good.
Yeah. Also, there's a lot. We're just going to talk about all of the like biases in this movie. There's also a lot of anti-droid bias in a variety of ways, right? There's the like no life forms, so the escape pod is like ignored, which, you know, I'm okay because it's to our benefit and R2D2 lives. But then like they're not allowed in Mos Eisley Cantina. They don't
which
get
is
any
weird.
awards.
Like, what's the
Yeah.
backstory there? Like, we don't serve their kind. Did you have a lot of droids coming in asking to be served and then, like, making a mess? Like, what is the backstory?
Right.
You just need one to cut somebody's arm off, and then they're all banned.
But does that mean now there's a no Jedi policy? Because Ben Kenobi cut that dude's
Right.
arm off.
I was going to say, can we talk about that? Because that's like Obi-Wan cuts the guy's arm off and there's blood. You don't see that with any other lightsaber.
Right. Because
It
it
should be
cauterizes the
cauterized.
Yeah.
room.
So it's just like, that's always just like a, never realized that one. But it makes sense.
Yeah.
Also,
He
like,
intentionally turned the temperature down on his lightsaber so that it would bleed for dramatic effect.
Yes.
I was gonna say, also, it's kind of a dramatic response to like somebody bugging Luke and trying to start a fight. Like, that's a drastic. That's like Han's shot first levels of
Escalation. Yes.
escalation. Yeah. Han at least knew the guy could kill him.
Well, and I like the way that I kind of saw that this time around was like Obi-Wan puts all of his eggs in the Luke Skywalker basket, and he is like, this kid is going to save the universe. And so he like goes way aggressively violent to protect him in the cantina. He like openly uses his force suggestion against the stormtroopers. And then like that was kind of how I took him dying in the fight against Darth Vader too, is that he's like, oh, like now I'm gonna die and then I'm gonna haunt Luke for the rest of the movie to make sure that he like finishes the mission.
Speaking of ghosts, Josh,
Right? Oh man,
is
that would freak
Obi-Wan
me
a
out.
ghost?
I mean, he's literally called a Force Ghost, but yes. It's in the name.
Yeah,
Details,
and like
details.
again, I know there's like so much canon that was like built up later, but just thinking about episode 4 as a standalone movie, I like don't know how you're supposed to interpret that, because
Right?
Darth Vader like slashes him and then he vanishes and Darth Vader kind of like kicks the robe and is like,
Right, and it's like, where did he go?
he's gone. I guess this is normal.
Right?
I always felt like, and again, I was like a Star Wars nerd kid, like joined websites where you could be named a Jedi Knight if you answered these questions correctly. But like, it was always my understanding that, like, you know, at that moment, that's when Obi-Wan was like, I'm giving myself to the Force. I'm just giving, like, letting everything go.
Theosis. Union with the divine.
And then I think Vader's response was like, oh shit, like he is gonna be stronger now, like something's not great.
I love that quote. So the quote from Obi-Wan Kenobi is, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful. And it reminded me of the quote attributed to Archbishop Oscar Romero, which also echoes scripture and Jesus' words, "If you bury me, I will become a seed reborn in the Salvadoran people." And this sense that martyrdom itself gives birth to new movements, right? And we see it like we just had in our scripture readings at church, like Jesus comes on the scene after John has been arrested, and like that pattern of, and for John it's arrest and not yet death, but like the pattern of death and rebirth and the ways that that plays out and creates more power and more energy. And we see that like Luke takes that on. Luke is like distraught about this as of a day ago stranger-ish person, acquaintance, being killed, but then it like motivates him for all of these things.
Yep. But yeah, it's
Also,
definitely like apparently at least some of the time if you kill a Jedi, they just poof. And like with episode 4 there is no precedent. Like the very idea of a force ghost is so weird if you like pretend you don't know the rest of the Star Wars canon.
I was gonna say, I think going back to, you know, random old guy in the neighborhood, I think in Luke's vision, and I'm, you know,
in
projecting
the
whatever,
Lucan account,
like
of
Obi-Wan was like the first like cool thing that happened to him. Like his biggest memories are blowing up womp rats. Like, and all of a sudden, like, here's
with
this,
Biggs,
yeah,
with
Yeah.
Biggs, who comes
and then
back.
all of a sudden, here's this person that's like, I fought in the Clone Wars, I've resisted the Empire,
And
like,
also the first person who actually like gives him any information about his father too. So it's
and
like
like,
I'm losing my one connection to my father.
and Obi-Wan
Yeah.
was like supporting him and building him up, and it seemed like, you know, his aunt and uncle were trying to take care of him, but just keep him mellow.
Safe.
Like they didn't want, because they understood like you can't ever let Darth Vader know that he has his son's alive.
Yeah.
Right.
This is a good time to use your favorite Lord of the Rings quote, Emily. That we're keeping Luke secret and safe.
I
Oh,
actually said
second
it
one.
earlier. I was like,
Keep
it
Luke secret. Keep him safe.
Keep it secret. Keep it safe. I did say it earlier about Obi-Wan.
I love it.
Jenny was talking about him as the old wizard, Gandalf.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, keep it secret. Keep it safe. My favorite is actually, I am no man. Take off the helmet and
Iconic.
stab him.
Iconic.
I know. I've now been tracing that particular like phrasing in like it has popped up in other movies. For example, at the end of Clone Wars, the TV show, when Ahsoka is fighting Anakin / Darth Vader, and Darth Vader is like, "Revenge? That's not the Jedi way." And then Ahsoka says, "I am no Jedi," and
Amazing.
fights. And
Fantastic.
then somebody else, who was it? Oh, in Echo, they're like, "That's not how a man does the thing." And she's like, "I'm no man. Fight, 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 fight." It's great. I like all of a sudden it is everywhere. Still the most iconic is Lord of the Rings, but
Well, it also is the first. The privilege of being written in the 1940s and published in the 70s. Also, can I just say that I am disappointed with the lack of gayness in this movie? Like, it's gay. It's very
because
camp.
C-3PO is there.
Well, yeah, C-3PO and R2-D2, clearly gay couple. And also, like, it's super camp. So, like, it's queer in that sense, too. It's super campy. But, like, and Luke is clearly gay. He hasn't figured out his sexuality yet. He thinks he's in love with his sister, but he doesn't realize until a little bit later that, oh no, I'm actually in love with Han. We'll talk about that in Empire Strikes Back. But like,
it is a love triangle. It's just not Leia in the middle.
Yeah, it's just very disappointingly not. It's not gay enough. I want more gay.
That's what fan fiction is for.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's fair.
And the last thing I will say, well, two last things, but both have already been talked about, so it's more just a mention. in other episodes we've covered in Star Wars universe. One is the light and
Or
dark
will
binary.
have been talked about.
Yeah. But one is the light and dark binary of the Force, which is gross, and false binary, and also colorist. And the second is the Force itself. Is it pantheism? Is it panentheism? Is it both? Neither. Is it God? Is it something else? Who knows? But kind of
Is
those
it
things.
the ultimate concern? A la Paul
Okay,
Tillich.
Tillich.
I mean, Nerds at Church did a deep dive on it in our first season, and I just edited that to go up on YouTube, so fresh in my mind. I like it as the ultimate concern, but they do talk about it as the ultimate power.
Because when they're talking about the Death Star, Darth Vader says, your technological terror is nothing compared to the power of the Force.
And
here's the most advanced creation that they could make.
And retcon, we end up finding out that the Death Star is powered by the Force through the use of kyber crystals. So, if you want to get super nerdy about it,
push up my glasses.
Yep.
Right? I love the amount of glasses pushing we've got going on in this episode.
Literally, all of us are wearing glasses too.
So. And they're almost identical.
Oh my god!
Jenny's are slightly different than the rest of ours, but
yeah, the three of you have very, very similar styles. I like it. It's a good look.
The Clark Kent style.
Oh, I could trade. No, these are my computer glasses. They look almost identical to my non-computer glasses, except you can't see distance with them. Well, you might be able to. I can't. Anyway.
Yeah, these are so I don't run into a wall.
That's good to wear them. Mine are so things don't go.
I see in the notes, Emily, one more thing that you haven't touched on while I've been here thus far, which is Han's premature ejaculation, and referencing a Sojourner article about it.
We talked about it earlier.
Okay, just wanted to
Han shoots first.
I mean, we didn't.
For those of you not making the connection.
Reference
Thank you.
It as that.
I was not there.
It's kind of like when Star Wars takes on the EU.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well then I guess we can move to Force lore, which is basically where we talk about what the movie adds to the lore of the universe, which this is the first, so clearly everything is added to for the first time. But I do like, there's a few things in this that this movie makes it very clear, which later movies either softly retcon or come back to or expand upon, which is one, the Jedi being a religion. And in fact, Tarkin himself says to Darth Vader that the Jedi are destroyed. Vader is the only one left of their religion, and specifically uses the word religion. Obi-Wan's quote about the Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us.
Also, his
it binds the galaxy
power.
Together.
Come on.
Yes. I mean, it's a little gay, being surrounded and penetrated.
Also, ultimate power, which you have talked about. But also that the Jedi can talk to each other from the great beyond. And you can move things / kill people with your mind / with miming. Who knew mimes had so much power?
Yeah.
If I may add a quote that always strikes me with this now. It's in Mos Eisley when he actually, does the mind trick on the stormtroopers, and Luke's kind of like, what was that? And he's like, oh, the Force has a strong power on the weak-minded.
Yeah.
Which, use with that whatever political atmosphere you want to use it.
Yes.
Yeah, which is let's toss in ableism to all the isms we've got going on. But yeah, it is true.
And one other thing that I just think is hilarious is, speaking of the lightsaber, is we are being built up that the lightsaber is this great weapon, and we see it only being used in the first act. and then it just never comes back in this film. And so,
Well, it
like,
comes
I
back
feel
when Darth Vader and Obi-Wan are fighting.
okay, so it comes back a little bit in the beginning of the second act, but then but it
It's
feels
all
like it
first
feels
half,
very
yeah.
like it feels very Chekhov's gun, like we're getting built up for this huge epic conclusive battle, but then
And
the
then
battle
it's
happens in
lasers
space.
from a
There's
ship.
no, yeah, there's no lightsaber, and so it's just so interesting to me that the lightsaber is such an enduring um symbol of the Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
universe, even though it feels so underutilized in this movie, and it's
Yeah.
even fairly underutilized in Empire. Really only get that big epic payoff battle in Return of the Jedi.
I mean, I feel like I have an in-universe answer to that and an out-of-universe answer to that. In-universe, Obi-Wan says this is, what is it, like a more sophisticated weapon for a more
Mhm.
Yeah.
civilized age, or a more elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
More
Yeah.
elegant for more civilized.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, of course you're not going to bring a lightsaber to a Death Star fight, right? That like the rules have changed, and so like that has shifted, like the lightsaber is no longer suitable, I think, in the context of this film. I think out of universe, um every child who watched Star Wars and had access to like a wrapping paper roll had a lightsaber. And
It's
Mm-hmm.
so
true.
like
It's true.
it's like enduring iconic status, I feel like, is rooted in that, right? Like there's lots of cool
Yeah.
things in Star Wars, but there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing better than playing lightsaber and like whacking your sibling over the head with a paper towel roll or whatever.
As the youngest sibling, I find great offense in that.
As a fellow youngest sibling, I find great delight in having done that.
No, I knew better than that. Run
I did.
like hell if you do.
I mean, I knew that part. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
I mean, I
Oh,
think that's a really big homage to, like, the samurai style. Like, here's the katana. Here, it's the samurai sword.
Mhm.
It's so iconic and revered. But it's not like they used it
yeah.
every day. But it's just such a brilliant image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is a sense in which it is um, more. It's less. I think so. Okay, when I was in seminary, I took a class called The Spirituality of Lakota Christian Dialogue, and we went to Pine Ridge and Rosebud reservations for a week as part of the class. And we were talking to an Anglican priest there who's Lakota, and he talked about how people talk about like becoming more civilized, and white people talk about being more civilized, and like that's part of the narrative of manifest destiny and colonialism and all of that stuff. And he was like, but really we've just gotten more civilized at killing each other, which is we've gotten more distanced from the killing, right? Like we're not even flying the planes anymore. Drones do that, and we all sit in like Des Moines, Iowa, and fly the drones to kill the people. Um, and so there is something about lightsabers that their primary use at a distance is defense, right? Where they're used to block incoming stuff, which can be like a defensive offense if they angle their lightsaber the right way to like have it bounce back right. But it is a more intimate thing. So you have to
Mhm.
be close enough to reach somebody to really kill them with a lightsaber, and add into it that it automatically cauterizes the wound, and you are less likely to kill somebody and more likely to disable them, to maim them, and that they are more likely to live. And then and then there's a different repercussion of living with and seeing and engaging with and like figuring out what it means to be a peacekeeper or to repair damage and harm and violence with someone who you have physically cut off a limb
Mhm.
of theirs, and yet they are able to still live because you cauterized it immediately. Which
Mm-hmm.
I think is like there's something there for me that I'm like, okay,
Yeah, and I feel like when you combine that with the fact that the Death Star makes such a like clear analog for like nuclear warfare, right? This idea that
Yeah.
like a single weapon could potentially destroy a planet. It's like a very strong juxtaposition. And then I don't know how to like combine that with Obi-Wan choosing to like put his lightsaber away and die at the end of, you know, his little story arc.
Yeah.
I feel
Which
like it
only
was.
happened because they didn't know what to do with him and they had to get rid of him.
It's Hero with 1,000 Faces. You have to kill off the master so the apprentice can take over.
Well, I also feel like it was a no-win situation because, say, Obi-Wan somehow defeated Darth Vader, all those stormtroopers were there watching. Like, as terrible of a shot as they are, one of them is going to be able to get through his lightsaber blocking.
Yeah.
Well, and he needs to die so that he can haunt Luke.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
previously
That's literally like
established.
And also, this is a what is the word I'm looking for? Apocryphal story. But Alec Guinness apparently begged George Lucas to kill off his character because he was sick of saying these weird lines and didn't want to have to come back for a sequel.
I've read that.
Jokes on him, though. He had to come back for both sequels, but still.
I'm sure the
that is
payday
not
was
what
enough.
George Lucas. That is officially not what George Lucas said.
Of
in
course.
The commentary, and in fact was like said that he was like not happy that his character was killed off so quickly. So
there's the thing to learn about George Lucas is anytime he talks about Star Wars, take it all with a grain of salt. Like he makes up so much shit about Star Wars. Like it was always going to be 9 parts. It's like, no, it wasn't. Luke and Leia were always going to be. It's like, no, they weren't. Come on, dude.
No, it's kind of creepy if they were.
Right. So, well, I guess we can rate the movie. So, out of 10 kyber crystals, which are the crystals that power a lightsaber and the Death Star, how would you rate it? And do you have a favorite kill? We typically start with the guest unless you need time to think, and then one of us can start.
Josh, you want to go?
I can go. I would give this 8 out of 10 kyber crystals, just for the fact that so much of my younger life was like based around like watching Star Wars and loving like that story of the small town kid that lived on a farm becoming great. It's me.
That's you.
That right. And favorite kill. I mean, I do love the TIE fighter that just like lost his concentration and the one that like spun out and hit Darth Vader off. That is probably just because I don't even think Han hit him at first. I think that one was just distracted and just like clipped Darth Vader and like sent him flying off into space, which would have been a miserable trip back to an Empire controlled area.
Yeah, that tracks.
I will give it 7 kyber crystals, and like 5 of those are for the score and the art design. And I was trying to think about my favorite kill. I am gonna say my favorite kill is every poor control panel that got murdered in their like escape from the Death Star. They shoot so many control panels.
Right.
And then my favorite is when Leia's like, find the controls to extend the bridge. And Luke's like, oh, I just shot those. You dummy.
Yup. Yeah. What about you, Pace?
Of course, you're gonna go last.
Yeah.
The audience cannot witness my eye roll because they do this every time.
Almost every time. Occasionally, I switch things up if I'm like, I know exactly what I'm rating this, but I don't right now. It's the first. I gotta be careful.
I think I will also rate this an 8 out of 10 kyber crystals. So right there with Josh. It's just such an iconic cultural moment, and it has created such an immersive universe from like the books, the movies, the TV shows. Some of them are really good, some of them aren't. But then also, like you're saying, Jenny, earlier about the like all the fanfics and stuff like that, and just like how much creativity this has inspired, and how many people saw Princess Leia and it's like, I want to go to space and stuff like that. Kind of similar to how Star Trek inspired people as well in that way. So
Mhm.
so for those reasons, I give it 8 out of 10. And um, Kyber crystals. My favorite kill is probably Grand Moff Tarkin,
Mhm.
because he's an
That's a
asshole
good
and he
one.
totally deserved to go out. But a close second is TK. What was his call
Four,
sign? I
two,
forget.
one.
Yeah, TK421. Because if you read the From a Certain Point of View book, you find out about his and Tarkin's little gay love affair. So it makes it that much more tragic that he dies,
Hmm.
and off screen too.
Yeah, yeah. I am rating it 6.5. 6.5 Kyber crystals. Similar to Jenny, the score and the art design, and similar to Josh and Pace, the like nostalgia of it. Um, Mostly it's a 6.5 for the sake of R2D2 and Leia, and it is not higher for the sake of Luke, the whiny boy, and Han.
Yeah, the movie really has to overcome the Luke dragging it down as the main character.
Yeah,
Like, it
it's just
really
like,
works
I
hard to
mean,
do
the
that.
whole, like, when we were watching it, I haven't watched it in a while because I've been, like, waiting to rewatch it for, like practically a year now. Um, but while we were watching it, I was like, when we were reading the From a Certain Point of View, I was like, there's basically, like, 3 scenes that there's a bunch of different characters on, and that's it. And then when we were watching it, I was like, oh, it really is, like, Tatooine on the Death Star, destroying the Death Star. Like, those are the 3 scenes. And so while we were watching it, I was like, this is taking forever. And then all of a sudden, we were destroying the Death Star, and I was like, wait.
Yeah, I
Oh,
definitely, as I was watching it, I would like pause and turn to my husband and I was like, I'm Luke Skywalker and I'm going to look sulkily at the sunset now. I'm Luke
Oh, that's such
Skywalker
a
and
cool
I'm going to look
scene.
sadly at this chessboard now.
Agreed, though. I'm with you, Josh. I'm like, yes, and also it looks really cool.
It
that's
And
would
why
as
they
look
some
put
it
it
would
on the
look
main
cool
menu
without
screen.
Luke in it.
Right, agreed.
no,
He's
like
not the cool part.
as somebody that like has always like either had really curly hair or like started losing their hair and is starting to accept it. That scene with like the two suns and then like Luke's hair blowing in the wind, like I wanted that so
I don't
bad.
know. From behind, he could be a lesbian, like with that butch haircut. Like, I'm
He
for
could, but
that.
he's way too whiny for it.
I don't know. I've met quite a few whiny lesbians.
Mm,
Josh,
Uh,
I feel like what you're saying though is that image of Luke was like gender euphoria for you.
Yeah.
I
Beautiful,
respect it.
that was
beautiful.
a fantastic like hair flip that
Hmm.
all of our listeners who won't ever see it missed out on.
And
But
if it wasn't so bitter cold, I would have shaved my head, so it would have been even more ridiculous.
oh, I have been there. Um, I will say for my favorite kill, I am also a Grand Moff Tarkin favorite kill. I am not gonna put TK421 as my like secondary favorite kill because then it just becomes a tragic love story and I have to have some version of empathy for Grand Moff Tarkin and I don't want to do that
No,
because
you
he's the
don't.
asshole who they're like, there is a chance that this could go bad and he's like, pshaw!
Yep.
Literally like the hubris on him.
Uh,
And I had no jump scares, which is
I'd be
probably not
surprised if you
very
did,
surprising.
considering how
Yeah.
many times you've seen this, and also the fact that it's not really a scary movie.
Yeah, there isn't we do jump scares because I am the horror Padawan in this co-hosting relationship. So we have not yet graduated to watching the really scary ones at night.
Listen,
I still watch those
I'm
during
right
the
there
day.
with you. I'm right there with you, Emily.
I mean,
It's
your first guest appearance, we watched a scary movie, Jenny. No, we didn't. That movie was not scary.
We
It was
watched a
laughably
vampire
funny.
anime and it was incredibly campy. It was not scary.
Especially when if you watch the dubbed version.
Yes.
um, well, where can our listeners find you both if you want to shout out any social media handles, upcoming projects, and also, importantly, where can they catch an episode of Irreverent Bible Talk?
Yeah,
Besides the one that we're going to link to with Pace.
Yes. Please listen to our episodes. We did 2 with Pace. You can find Irreverent Bible Talk wherever you get your podcasts, or at soundcloud.com/irreverentbible. Did I get it? Did I get it right, Josh? Thank you.
I believe so. You're the one that has to handle all that stuff.
Love it.
Nice. Can they follow you like individually anywhere on social media or anything?
You
okay
can
to
find
say
me. My profile is public, so you can follow me. I don't post a ton these days, but every
true.
once in a while I go on a tear, and then I have like a lot of snarky opinions that I share on social media. So
It's coming close to Lent, so I feel like now's a good time to start following you.
now's a good
For the
time for
snark.
snarky opinions.
Or as I call it, a Tuesday.
A day ending in Y.
Yeah, I'm not big on the social media. I know I should be someday, but
You don't
We
need
don't
to
do
be.
shoulds. We already
anymore,
established
like
this. No shoulds.
fair. Anymore, like I get my phone and I'm just like, I pass it to my wife. Like, how do I do this? And I don't know when this happened. Like, I used to be good at this, but now
God
it's like
bless.
technology. Like, I got nothing.
You've got more important things to do, like Lego Fortnite.
Ooh,
Ooh.
that sounds
Just-
fun.
It's like Lego Minecraft. That's what it feels like.
I love it.
I was actually picturing building forts with Legos.
You can do that, but it's like a
Kind of,
video
yes.
game. It's virtual.
Yeah, I was picturing it in person, and I was like, "Oh, that would be so cool." Okay, go shoot people or whatever.
Well, I will announce our next scary movie, and then Emily can announce our next Star Wars movie, because obviously I'm the one who's all excited about the scary ones coming up. Which next week we're going to be covering Alien from 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. So
Speaking of kick-ass female film protagonists,
right, I am so excited to talk about this movie.
I'm excited to see it for the very first time.
It's good.
It is really good.
I've
Can't
heard good things
say
about it.
that for pretty much the rest of the franchise, except maybe Aliens. But the first one, so good. But yeah, so every other week we're going to be watching one of the Alien movies. Super excited to cover that. And then in 2 weeks,
Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, released in 1980, directed by Irvin Kershner, with special guest Pastor Beth Wartick. I'm super excited about having her on the podcast.
Yay!
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you again to our guests. I know this was a long episode. I only joined halfway through, and we still went for an hour with me on it. So I don't know how long y'all were going.
Probably an hour, I think. What are we at? Yeah, we're at like 2 hours. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This was the parts I was there for. Was a really good conversation. The parts before I was there, I'm sure, was lackluster. No, I'm kidding.
Ouch!
It was fun. It was fun, but it was more fun once you got here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having us on. It was awesome.
Yeah. And my car is dead. Yeah. So anyway, that's it for our show. Our theme music was by Matt May. We drop seasonally on Thursdays. Please comment, rate, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to all of the other Star Wars movies that we're covering this season, which are not the trilogies. Some Predator movie commentaries, some more stuff like that, the TV shows, all that. Patreon.com.
Discounts to our merch store.
Yep, discounts to our merch store. So go to patreon.com/horrornerds@church. It's only $5 to sign up, so cheaper than hitching a ride with Han Solo to Alderaan. Significantly cheaper than that.
Way cheaper.
Follow us on social media, Facebook, Insta at Horror Nerds at Church, Twitter and Blue Sky at HNACPOD for all the latest updates about everything, pretty much. Until next time, read the room. If you just lost your wizened old neighbor and you are being comforted by a woman who lost her entire family and planet, maybe you
Get your
could
head out of
offer
your
a little
ass.
bit get your head out of your ass and offer a little bit of consoling for her too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of just blowing right by it, George Lucas.